Can you turn the volume up?
I'm not sure that I can have it set. Maybe I'll talk into it. Okay, yeah, and so our director, as an adoptive parent himself, he understood its heart and wanted to bring it to readers. So Twice Blessed is told in 3 voices and follows Stefanie, a young Puerto Rican girl who lost her mother Rosa to AIDS, and Claire and Stan Altman, who moved from court-appointed guardians to adoptive parents. Honoring Rosa's wish for Stefanie to grow up in a loving home, they faced real challenges along the way, including a contested custody claim. Through it all, Stefanie's strength anchors the story, and love is the constant that helps this family take shape. This evening, we'll start with brief remarks from the authors, and then open it up for a short Q&A. After that, please help yourself to a drink and some food. Books are available for purchase at 25% off, and authors will be signing copies. Thanks again for coming tonight, and now I'm pleased to turn it over to Stefanie to kick things off.
I'm not an expert at this, but hi everyone. Thank you so much for coming and being a part of this story that we have. I just wanted to introduce our moderator for this evening, who is Dr. Richard Dudley. Dr. Richard Dudley is a graduate of Temple University Medical School, who is a practicing psychiatrist in adolescent and adult mental health, and has held teaching positions at the CUNY Medical School, at City College, New York University, New York Medical College, and has consulted widely at children's services organizations. Dr. Dudley serves on the boards of many not-for-profit organizations and has published widely on mental health, child custody determinations, and mental health issues where lesbian or gay sexual orientation is an issue. So, thank you so much for being here. Turn it over to my mom.
Before we turn the program over to Dr. Dudley, I want to ask Commissioner Danhauser, who is the Commissioner of Administration for Children's Services,
Put the mic closer.
to say a few words. Commissioner Danhauser has a long history at ACS, and between his stints at ACS was at Graham Wyndham Child Care Agency, and
Good evening, everybody. Thank you, Claire, for that generous introduction. I just want to say a few words because I know we're all here to hear about the story, your beautiful family story. And Stefanie, Claire, Stan, thank you for reaching out to us at the Administration for Children's Services. We are a big bureaucracy that is responsible for making sure that the city's children are safe and that they have the bonds of love that they need. What I've been trying to do in this work is what I think you see in this book, which is to try to make that big bureaucracy as nimble as possible to surround those that love one another and those that love children with as much support as possible, and to honor all of the ways that families can come together. I think one of the things that I'm most touched by in this book is that the origin of the story is care between 2 adults, between neighbors serving neighbors, and a commitment to take care of one another and one another's family no matter what. 2 adults that might not have known each other in circumstances. I think too often in our society today we've lost bonds across different kinds of communities, and I hope tonight is one place where we can come together and learn how love takes shape in so many different ways. And I just, again, am so honored to be here and that ACS is included in this. I think you'll find both the story and the message that is behind that story deeply moving. So I'll kick it back to you. Thank you for having us.
thank you.
For those of you who don't already know the authors, I thought we'd start out by allowing each of them to kind of briefly introduce themselves.
Okay. Hi everyone, Stefanie Altman again. I am the daughter to say Claire Altman. Here is my right. I don't know where's the story is in the book, so you can read the book. I'll let that be the introduction.
Sounds like
Hi.
a sixth grade report.
I'm Claire Altman, and never thought that what happened once we opened the Highbridge Woody Crest Center and Stefanie and her mom came to live there. We took a day at a time and we didn't know what was going to come next. But we were committed when Stefanie and her mom, I think, as you may have seen if you've read the book, were the first 2 residents of this AIDS facility that we created for children and families, mostly mothers, with HIV and AIDS. And it was an interesting story, but we never knew what was going to be the next step along the way. We just knew that this group of people needed care and they needed a residence. I should add that Dr. Dudley was on our board of directors from day one, so he knew Stefanie when she was 3 months old. And then it led to what became our story. So with that, I'm going to turn the floor over to Stan.
What am I supposed to say? So I'm the father in this story. Quite frankly, I would have never guessed if you would have suggested to me some 20 some odd years ago, maybe 30 some odd years ago, that we would be sitting here telling this story. I would have told you you're out of your mind, which is what I said when Claire suggested that we become Stefanie's standby guardian. I thought the idea at 55 to become a guardian, having had 2 sons who are now out of college, and I suddenly felt free. And as what I've said since, had I persisted in that position, it would have been the biggest mistake I ever made in my life.
Okay. Since I'm not one of the authors of this book, I feel that I'm free to give an unabashed why I'm so excited about this book and why I think you should all buy it and read it if you haven't already read it. Throughout my career, I've been involved in so many of the issues raised by this book. As a clinical psychiatrist, I've seen individuals and families who've been going through this sort of process. As a forensic psychiatrist, I testified in child custody cases, and child abuse and neglect cases, but also in criminal cases where so many of the people that I saw were there because they were not protected as children and they weren't given the opportunity to really flourish. I consulted with ACS, developing mental health programs for caseworkers, being on the Child Vitality Review Panel, the first one. At the beginning of the HIV crisis, like Claire said, I was on the board of Highbridge Woody Crest. It was also very focused on how we're going to take care of the children who were orphaned by the AIDS epidemic. And so what's exciting about this book to me is that it's the rare opportunity to hear about these issues from the standpoint of somebody who's going through it, as opposed to from lawyers or judges or caseworkers or experts or academics. And it's a rare voice. The fact that it's written in these 3 different voices, including the kid here, makes it a really dynamic sort of story to read. The other thing that's so exciting to me about this book is that it's a confirmation of the fact that even when a child is handled a very difficult hand at the beginning of their lives, if we fight to protect them, if we fight to give them what they need, they can flourish and become a highly functioning and compassionate adult. And that too is a very uplifting, very exciting story. And I think not just one for those of us who are involved in this work or those of you who want to adopt, but I think it's a very exciting story for all of us. And it should inform a lot of the policies and decisions that we make. So, my second prerogative is that I'm going to start asking questions. And I'm going to ask a couple of them, then I'm going to open it up to the floor for any questions that you might have. So my first question is that there are clearly a lot of challenges that come up in this story, and I'd like each of you to just kind of know what was most challenging for you in going through all of this.
I guess I can start. I would say for me it was holding on to a sense of hope. When first going through, when my mother passed, you know, that was the first like dimming of the light that was like very traumatic to go through, especially with her condition and in the era that was the AIDS epidemic in the 1990s and early 80s. And then all the, less to say, the stumbling blocks that kind of happened after that with my caretakers in the interim before getting adopted. Going through then the battle of family court, which was hell, to say the least. But I had an amazing legal advocate. I don't want to give her a shout out, put her on the spot, but she really was a guardian in that. And yeah, love you. And yeah, she saved my life, you know. And also, you know, my parents here, I don't want to bring me to tears. They were stewards in helping me get that sense of hope back. And so I have it now. That's great. Yeah.
It's hard to follow Stefanie. Stan always says that Stefanie speaks and draws pictures, and we speak with words. And pictures worth 1,000 words, as we know. I think the biggest challenge was that it was when we founded Highbridge Whittycrest, and we knew we were going to have parents who were facing a then thought of as fatal illness, that we should make some arrangement for parents to designate a standby guardian, which is part of the New York State law. And many of them did. Stefanie's mom, Rosa, didn't want to do that at the time. And so then when she was facing the end of her life, and this was before the antiretroviral drugs, so there weren't really any drugs that were going to forestall the inevitable with AIDS then. She asked me to help her find a guardian for Stefanie. And I introduced her to this friend and that person and the other one. And finally a neighbor said, "Claire, you're doing this all wrong. You and Stan should become Stefanie's guardian." And I said, "Oh, no." And a few weeks later, Rosa invited me to come to they had moved into, she and her partner that she met at Highbridge Whittycrest had moved to an apartment that my organization managed in the community. So I was invited to this meeting. And I came in and they were all dressed up. They had kept Stefanie home from nursery school and she was dressed up. And I thought, what's this going to be about? And Rosa said, you know, I'd like you and Stan to become Stefanie's guardian. So I said, I'm in, definitely, but I have to talk to Stan. And so that's when I was also doing work in Dade County, Miami, and we flew down that night because I was going to do a few days' work, and walking on the beach the next morning, and I said, "What would you think about?" And Stan drops to the ground in the water, and I thought he was having a heart attack. And he said, it's a terrible idea. And so I didn't say much, but over the next few days he came around to realizing that if it meant a lot to me, then it was important to him. And I guess that's really the cornerstone of a partnership. So from that point on, we definitely didn't have a roadmap of what would happen. But we proceeded. Sadly, Stefanie's mother died about a month later. Well, actually, it was interrupted months, but anyway, when she passed away, we then went to court and became the appointed guardian, and had to deal with, I think, to answer Richard's question, probably the most challenging part in that event was dealing with, we agreed to share custody with the mother's partner because we didn't want to disrupt Stefanie's life. She had already had it disrupted enough with her mother dying. So we did that, and that process lasted about another 6 years, which was fairly trying because we didn't actually have the same view about raising a child. And Stefanie was very curious. She wanted to try everything from acting, which there was an after-school program called Performing Arts. And when she was 5, Stefanie couldn't say performing arts, so she called it farming arts. And but she thought that was great. Her first part was being the dog in Peter and the Wolf, so she crawled around on the ground during the whole thing and memorized everybody's line in the story. But she wanted to do everything: swimming, dancing, gymnastics, and that was to the extent that we could help her do those things. We saw that it helped her find herself, and so that's what we really focused on. And it was really our love for Stefanie and for each other that kept us going in all of this. So the challenges were there, but there was also great rewards. And sometimes we would just look at ourselves, Stefanie, and say, she came home one day from school a few years later and said, "You know, it's great just being a kid." And I thought, well, that's what we've been trying to help you do. So that was our goal. So, Stan?
So for me, the first big issue was reconciling what my head was saying, which was, this is the most bizarre, stupidest thing I'd ever heard of. And what I finally realized, what my heart was saying, was if it mattered so much to Claire, then being in it together meant that we were in it together. And so it didn't matter where I was coming from, it mattered where she was coming from. And I think once I resolved that commitment issue, and we decided we were going forward with Stefanie, that was never a discussion again. And the hard part, because both of us had pretty active professional lives, was to recognize that now the most important part of our life was helping Stefanie grow and protecting her. In spite of everything that we went on in our professional lives, we managed to figure out a way that she came first. And I think that commitment to her and sticking to it through all of the obstacles we ended up facing was both rewarding the way it ended, fortunately, but it was some of the darkest periods in my life. There were some days we walked out of family court. I wasn't sure I'd make it to the car because it was such a bizarre experience that seemed to have nothing to do with the child. You know, we kept thinking this is about the best interest of the child. And we would go with these hearings and it would have nothing, it was like a circus. So for me, that was what the challenge was. But I think once we were in it, we were in it. And that's why we're here tonight.
So when you read this book, it's clear that this whole experience has, for each of you, impacted on your life and the direction that your life ultimately took. And so you might want to share, what do you think that the biggest impact of this was on your life?
That's a loaded question.
Of course.
Why not? Oh man, can I think on that for a bit?
What's that?
Circle back to me? Yeah, put on my pants.
All right, so I'll go first. I think it had two impacts on me. The first one is, I think, suddenly realizing what commitment meant. I don't think as much as Claire and I talked about being in it together, which we did a lot of that, but I don't think I fully appreciated it until it was really put to the test. And then the other part of it, I often say this to Stefanie, I had a childhood which was pretty traumatic. And as a result, I buried all my feelings. The way I managed to survive my childhood was everything now filtered through my head. My emotions were just buried. In fact, as a grown-up, I would find myself in situations that were emotionally loaded, and I would not know what to do. I couldn't relate to it at all. And once we got involved with Stefanie, I kept telling her, no matter what I do, you refuse to let me close my heart to you. And eventually,
No.
So at some point, the walls disappeared because it was just about love.
Okay, we'll go in this order. I think, you know, as Stan said, we were both busy professionals, and we kind of said, okay, this is our life. Our two sons, David, who's here, were by that time out of college and on their own. And we really thought, well, we're too busy to deal with children and think about that. So, but then when Rosa asked us to become Stefanie's guardian, I couldn't say no. And Stan came around to that, as he explained. And so then the impact was being open to seeing how a child grows and letting them find themselves, not alone, but with some guidance. But being able to say, you know, we'll help you find what it is you'd like to do. And so it meant going down many pathways. And as we were older than many parents of Stefanie's friends, we didn't really have the same kind of social crowd or whatever that they did. But it was like being willing to explore whatever came along. Stefanie's mother wanted her raised a Catholic because she was Catholic. I had been raised a Catholic, but was really no longer a practicing Catholic. And Dan could say the same thing about Judaism. But we found a very ecumenical, multiracial church here in Chelsea, and we went there, and Stan became the resident person to explain Jewish traditions to the congregation. And I have to, you know, it was interesting. Stefanie, she took up teaching the kids one day to spin the dreidel. And so they said to her afterwards, "Are you Jewish?" She said, "I'm half Jewish and half Puerto Rican." So she had figured out, you know, how to accommodate things and take her own take on things. But you know, we learned a lot of stuff along the way that we would have never figured out. When she wanted to get into the talented and gifted program at her elementary school, she took the test like a month or so after her mother died. And she didn't do well or bad, she just didn't do anything on it. And so after 2 years in elementary school, she said, you know, I belong in the talented and gifted program. Why am I not in that? And I said, well, let me go talk to the principal. So I went to the principal and I said, you know, this testing thing is discriminatory against our daughter who's Hispanic. And so I think you need to change it. And she said, we did. I said, when? She said, just now. And I said, so what's your process now? And she said, we'll interview your daughter and see how that works. And so Stefanie went to the class and was interviewed. But you find that, you know, when you advocate for something that's really important to you, and then Stefanie came home and said, you know, I told you this is where I belonged. And so she excelled, but helping her to do what she wanted to do and not having our own views of it, I think we didn't want to make Stefanie in our image, whatever that was. We wanted her to find herself. And just being able to do that, I think it's probably one of the hardest things for parents in some ways. But it's ultimately really worth it because it takes you down some paths you would never have known. And so everything was an eye-opening experience for us.
Beautifully said. So I had some times in the writing. I was like, and it hit me right here because one of the biggest impacts was realizing what it meant to be unconditionally loved. In a sense of not having conditions like in your childhood. You know, when I was before my parents, when I was in the caretaking of my mother's partner, it was very conditional. Like you had to do good in school, and then love was expressed. So that concept of stepping into that space where unconditional love was expressed and given was a huge thing for me. And then also I think the other impact for me was holding multiple identities, to the point of my mom's point about being half Jewish, half Puerto Rican. It's like the microcosm of New York, but also just, I think just holding space within myself as a person to appreciate both sides, both identities and what that brings, and the rewards that brings, but also it brings complexities, and you fit into rooms that you may not be totally a part of, or not, somewhat a part of. So it's made me, and I don't think it's no coincidence that I studied anthropology in undergrad. I went to study abroad in London for my master's, so there's a lot going on, a lot of things, but I think it was also the exposure when I was in their care to be, to travel to amazing places and be enrolled into certain activities that brought me a lot of wealth and experience.
Great.
Yeah.
Richard, can I say something? Stephanie brought up the issue of studying for her public health degree in London, which is interesting because we became, at some point in the story, where we became friends with Angela Lansbury. And we were in London to see her perform in Blithe Spirit. And after the show, we got together with her backstage, and part of the discussion was, Stefanie, where was she going to go to graduate school? She had just visited the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, where one of my former students gave her a tour. And Angela said unequivocally, you go to London, forget about Michigan. And so it's interesting that tonight would have been Angela Lansbury's 100th birthday.
Okay, willing to open up the floor for anybody who might have a question for our authors. Yes.
This is directed to Stan and Claire. You mentioned there were challenges as you went through the process. Is there anything that you would have done? Oh, sorry.
She's bringing you a mic.
My voice won't carry.
And of course, it's not working.
It was working, so I'm going to take one of the.
Here you go.
Can I say something? I have a loud voice. I was a priest in Memphis, Tennessee when Claire was a teenager. And she and her family came down. I came to Memphis 3 months after Dr. King was killed and Bobby Kennedy was killed the week I came to St. Patrick's Church in Memphis, Tennessee. And Claire and her mother and father, Joe and Margaret Hager, and her sister and brother were the heroic people that came down to our parish and really supported us. So she was well trained in the work in Memphis for what she did for you. And I want to compliment you, Claire. It's wonderful reflecting your parents' values. God bless you.
I'm glad to be a practice person. Directed primarily towards Stan and Claire. I'm Michael Watson. I've known them for a long time. And Stefanie, feel free to jump in as well. Is there anything that you could have done differently that would have dramatically improved the overall experience? Because you mentioned there were some challenges that you had to overcome. So thinking about people who might think about parenting and foster care and everything else, what could you have done differently that would have made this process less stressful and better?
Quite frankly, I don't think there's anything we could have done. I think we were faced with a couple of really serious issues we had to deal with. One, in the co-parenting period, there's some serious issues that were going on in the other household. And while we thought about going to court to claim sole custody, we were advised by a dear friend of ours that we really would have a hard time making the case that there was a change in circumstance, and we ran the risk of losing the case. I think the only time that we really laid it on the line, besides when we ultimately went to court to get sole custody, was during the point we were discussing going to court to become her permanent guardian. And the caregiver insisted that she was gonna be the mother and she would have sole custody. And I said to her, if that's what you want, then we're out. Because we're not gonna have Stefanie show up in 5 years and have nothing to do with raising her. So we either co-parent her or you do it by yourself. And she relented. But it was very difficult. I don't know, we went around many times whether we should do something. I think we just decided we just had to deal with it. And for her sake, it was important that we dealt with it, that she didn't have to deal with it. She being Stefanie.
Yeah. So in terms of doing something differently, I think we kind of just took each step as it came. We didn't have an answer. I mean, part of the, you'll see when you read the book that what prompted us to seek full custody happened in November of 2001, which obviously for those of you living here particularly know that September of 2001, if you would, all hell broke loose here. And I was running a wellness center along with Noreen Spiro, who's our cousin right there. I called Noreen and said, you saw what happened on the World Trade Center, what do we do? And she said, we stay open. I said, well, it's this and that. Noreen said, we're a healing center, we have to stay open. I said, you're right, I'll be down. And what ensued was we ended up doing a lot of, quote, relief work. We called it, the place was called Olive Leaf, and we called it Olive Relief at that point. And we did programs for first responders. Bob Kaleli, Stefanie's erstwhile godfather, created a virtual feeding program for 250 police officers and firemen every night for a month. People would say, what's in this recipe? It's delicious. I have no idea. Because Bob made it up with whatever donations we had that morning. But it was kind of we said to Stefanie, we got to do this. We couldn't set everything aside, and plus after school programs weren't running and so forth. And one day I'm walking through after school through the reception area of our Olive Leaf program, and Stefanie has written on the top of her page of homework, she said, I'm trying to do my homework here, but I'm sitting here in a madhouse of healers that my mother created. And so we said, oh, she's coping, I mean, what were you going to do? You couldn't devote all your attention to her at that point because we had something we had to do, and she came along and had a good spirit about it. But I think it's, you just don't know whether what you're doing is right or not, and you'll never know until the child grows up and begins to, make her own choices. Stefanie, do you want to?
To be honest, I don't know what I could have done differently because I was so young, and really the whole situation was out of my control. I probably think of how I could have spoken up maybe a few more times, but again, my voice was squelched by all the chaos that was happening, that it would have been really hard to do that. But maybe if there was one wish I had, it would be that,
That just kind of points to what I was trying to say earlier, that one of the things that's so exciting about this book is the three voices, and participating in all these systems that are supposedly so totally focused on children, and never having an opportunity to figure out what would a child say in response to this experience. You've given us an example of what a child would say, and that's part of what's so exciting about reading this book. Anybody else? Questions, comments?
Yuri?
Yes.
Hi. Stefanie, Claire, and Stan, just wanted to thank you for your courage. It's very courageous to get up in public and tell such a private story. So just want to recognize your courage. Thank you for your courage. You know me and my background in policy, so I like asking policy questions. Stephanie mentioned that her guardian was a godsend. You had mentioned some of the, extraordinary challenges with the family court system. Wanted to focus a little bit on, social and emotional support and that component. You've been talking a lot about, supporting Stefanie, supporting each other, but of course, if there wasn't, there at least should be a role that the system should play in supporting you with, the three of you and the different needs that you had. Would you mind talking a little bit about what presence or absence there was of support services for you at the time? And if you believe, 20, 25 years later, how things have changed and what recommendations you have for the system today?
Well, I think there are now, and we're pleased to have, in addition to the commissioner, the leadership of Spence Chapin Family Services, Kate Baskaya and her staff, or some of her staff are here, and they provide a wide range of services that today that I don't know were available when we were dealing with this 29 years ago. Maybe they were, but we really, I think the services we had were from our friends and family who were a whole, not to use a tired phrase, but it takes a village. But when we were, I've thought about and worked on this book for a long time, all the people who were involved in helping us from one thing to the other. We had, when it came to it, we had great lawyers, Ben Rosen here, and Stefanie's law guardian, Mari Hanahosa. But we also had friends who were lawyers who, echoed the same advice they gave us. But friends who got us involved in all kinds of ways to help Stefanie, from her soccer coach who was more than a soccer coach, to her viola teacher who was more than a viola teacher, who just helped all, in many, many ways. And our two sons who readily accepted Stefanie into the family, and their wives then after they became married. So it was a whole, even at the times, Dan's father was quite elderly and also quite ill. But he was a very big supporter of Stefanie and loved having her as, if you would, his granddaughter. So it was just a whole troop of people who came together informally to provide support to us and to Stefanie.
I'm Doris Gonzalez. I've known Stan, Claire, and Stefanie a really, very long time. I can't wait to read the book. I've heard about the book for the longest time. And this question is for the three of you. After reading the book, is there any action you would love someone to take just based on their experience of your experience? I would love to know that. I mean, the story is amazing, but is there something that you hope someone will do or feel with the book?
Yes, I'd love to take this one on because, and I have my son sitting here. So as a young parent, I can tell you for a fact that the idea between conditional love and unconditional love is not something I even understood. And in many ways, I was probably conditional. You're making too much noise, be quiet. It wasn't about him, it was about me. I think the lesson I came away from all of this is living a real life of meaning really is living it through the eyes of unconditional love. And it really is about the child. Claire and I both believe in the part of Gibran's The Prophet where he talks about the mother preparing the child to go out and live their life. That's been a very strong issue for both of us. And so living a life where we unconditionally love Stefanie, there were no questions about it. It was about where she was coming from, not where we were coming from, is the lesson I give to people. If you really want to raise your child and make them independent, then you really have to focus on hear what they're saying, and you have to focus on what they need, not what you need, because you're already the adult. So that's my one piece of advice for people.
And I would echo that, but also say that catch my thought again. That we would like the message to get out to foster parents, people who are considering becoming foster parents, people who are thinking about adoption, people who are going through the adoption process, and adoptees. That there are a lot of hurdles along the way, there's no question about that. But as Stan's saying, framing it with unconditional love, one gets through them. If somebody had told me all the hurdles ahead of time, I would say, oh my God. But you learn to deal with things one thing at a time, and I think it's that unconditional love that becomes the glue to help you put the pieces together and also give you the courage to do this. So I would hope that anybody thinking about adoption would think that way. And so we really are happy that Commissioner Danhauser and Kate at Spence-Chapin and other groups have been, want to get that message out to prospective foster parents and adoptive parents, because I think you hear too many of the challenging horror story kind of things, and it doesn't have to be that way.
And the other thing I would say here is, many people have said to us how fortunate Stefanie is. And we often have to remind them how fortunate Claire and I are. And this isn't a one-sided gift. I mean, it was a gift for us, the fact that she became part of our life.
My name is Bob Coaley, and I've been fortunate enough to be on the scene before Stefanie was, and I remember when she was 1 year old and showed up at Highbridge Whittycrest and stole the scene when they were opening the place. Anyway, it's wonderful to see you all up there, and I've had the great good fortune of getting an advance copy and reading the book. And one of the things I remember as you were all going through this process, and I was heir to a lot of it, was there was that judge. There was always, she just seemed so needlessly churlish, and she was not, he didn't seem to be in favor of doing what was best for Stefanie. She seemed to just be on a cloud of her own. But I remember the day we finally went down to court, and you asked me to come and be a witness when you were adopting, when it became officially that you were adopting Stefanie. And when it was over and done with, and we were leaving the court, that judge came walking down the hall and said, oh, well, I think I'm seeing you next week or something like that. And you said, we've just adopted Stefanie. Did you ever encounter that judge again? Or did you ever understand what she was up to? She just seemed...
No, and we did. No, Bob, we never tried to find her again. We were very happy that it was all over.
Yeah.
In fact, we've never even gone back to family court just to reminisce.
I'm Mary, and I just wondered, how did India impact your story, if it had any impact, meeting Anna or...
Do you want me to take that one? Go ahead. I mean, I have my account of at least how India, it really was the not inspiration, but Alma, who's our Indian guru back in Tamil Nadu. She basically just said to us, I think your family has to start writing this book. It was with Alma's blessing. I mean, come on, like you can't bypass that. And I think that was officially, I mean, we had pondered it for years, and I remember walking into my mom's the sunken living room within their apartment. She had stacks and stacks of notes, and I was like, what's going on there? Like, there's a lot of notes, because I know always when I was growing up, she would write in the mornings in her journal, just as a ritual with her coffee, the quiet moments and all that stuff. But something felt different about that stack, and it was over the years you collected notes, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it went with, and then once we got that kind of introduction from Alma to start, we were like, all right, cool, let's do this. And I also think, just before you go, I think also the story is spiritually infused with hope. And I think having a faith or having a walk of spirituality helped all of us really to hold on to that, which is, you don't have that, I don't really know what you have, So that's a very huge thing.
The some of you may wonder how we got involved with India, but Stan had cancer surgery in 2003, and his doctor was very involved with this teacher in India and asked us if we wanted to join him and his family over the Christmas break and go to India. So we had a lot of opportunities, Stan and I, before Stefanie came into our lives, to go to India, but we never did for whatever reason. And so Stan came home and said to the two of us, "What do you think?" And Stefanie said, "Well, where is he in India?" And we said, "In southern India, Tamil Nadu." And she said, "They're vegetarians there, right?" And so I don't know how she knew that, but she said, "So no more hamburgers there, right?" I said, "Right." I said, "Is that a problem?" She said, "No, I just wanted to know." And so we go to India, and the first evening after the prayer services, our teacher had us, and Bob Kaleli was with us, and we sat on the ground in this little hut, basically, and Amma said, "Do you have any questions?" So Stefanie said, "I have a question." She said, "Do you believe in reincarnation?" And Amma said, "Yes." And she said, "Well, my parents say that I was an Indian princess in a past life because she wanted to be waited on a lot of times." And I was mortified. And Amma said, "Not only were you an Indian princess in a past life, but you're an Indian princess in this life." So Stefanie was happy with that. She could keep being her Indian princess.
Mind you, that was at the time. Now I'm like a little bit more humble.
Did you want to say?
No, I think Stefanie captured it. I think to get through what we went through, we needed strong faith and belief that somehow this would all work out, and just surrender to what we could do, which is the only thing we could do is every day just deal with the day. I think having a teacher who taught us the importance and value of a spiritual life is what made it all possible for us.
Thank you. My name is Tashi Chodron. I'm a Tibetan, never seen Tibet, and coming to New York, Stan and Claire and Stefanie have adopted me as part of their family living here in New York, and I really want to congratulate, and I've seen Stan working, always working for the Baruch Rubin Project about the well-being of the youth, because they are the future. And day in and day out, and then, you know, a successful man has a woman behind, Claire supporting 100%, and then Stefanie, who calls me big sister. So thank you for this beautiful book. You know, considering what's happening around the world, I think each of us should have multiple books and give it as gift to bring hope and aspiration and inspiration. Thank you so much for, you know, this beautiful book. And thank you for, you know, the Fordham for, you know, publishing this. And this is a traditional Tibetan white silk scarf that has 8 auspicious symbols that I want to honor, offer it, and we do it, you know, put it around the neck for blessing and auspiciousness. Thank you. And this is also, of course, for good health and long life, for prosperity, not here. And this is called kata in Tibetan word. Thank you. And one for you too.
Oh, wow.
Yes. And if I can have a picture here. Thank you so much. Any more questions?
Anyone? Well, we thought we would,
There's one
Yeah.
over here.
This is Seymour. He's actually named after Seymour, who's mentioned in the book. And you got a question? Let me tell him. He wants to know why the name Twice Blessed was. What was the catalyst for that? And, what were the other options that were considered?
You go ahead.
All right, so it's kind of a funny story. Thanks, Seymour. Our youngest audience member, seemingly. I don't know if there are other ones, but thank you. Yeah, so basically the title Twice Blessed actually came from, I'm trying to decide how to tell the story, but we had a country house up in New Falls, New York, which is about an hour and a half north of the city, and there was a thrift store actually in town called Twice Blessed. So I did snag the name and was like, that'd be a great name for a book. And it's not only just a thrift store, it was like I wasn't thrifted. Like, I don't want to get that conception out there, but it was it's like, what? No, that's not what happened at all. There's a lot more depth and beauty to our story than a thrifted one. A thrifted item can be sentimental, but all that to say, I figured my first origin, my family origin was my first blessing, having been born to my mom, who ushered in the second blessing, which was my parents. So that was really the inspiration for the bigger meaning for the name Twice Blessed, other than a thrift store. So, yeah. Thank you.
I don't know if Seymour has a follow-on question, but the artwork here, as we've told many of you, is basically a pastel that Stefanie's mother did before she passed away. That's the original piece. That when we were cleaning out our house last summer, I found it lying on Stefanie's bed in her bedroom that she hadn't slept in for a few years because she was off on her own. And we have a few other things from her mother that are this style. So when we told the public, the editor said to me, "What would you have any ideas for cover art?" And I said, "Well, what do you think about this?" And so he and the Fordham team liked it and made it the cover of the book. And you'll see the book is dedicated to Stefanie's mom.
Thank you. So we decided to end this session with Stefanie reading a little part of the book to you.
And so we just hope this brings it home, and then it'll spur you to pick up your own copy and read it. So without further ado, okay. All right, so when I look from the adopted side, there are still a lot of questions that remain. I love my adopted family so much, and I'm grateful for them every day. I love breaking stereotypes and surprising people with my story. With every new person I meet, I'm reminded just how unique my story is in so many ways. Claire held me in her arms when I was just 3 months old, mothering me without realizing what she was doing, what she was destined to do. She carried me by caring for me and my biological mother, my Mommy Rosa, whose memory I cherish. And Mommy Rosa performed her most powerful act as a mother by placing me in Claire and Stan's care before she died. Claire loved me before guardianship papers, social workers, and court orders became part of the fabric of our lives. And I love and her love and commitment were so powerful that Stan, the only father I've ever had, grew to love me as well. You see, I had 2 mothers, but I only ever had 1 father. Adoption, taking a child into your home and by heart by choice, loving, nurturing, and supporting them through all of life's transitions and challenges is a powerful form of unconditional love that we are all blessed to have experienced. And in this, I was truly twice blessed.
Say that we are about to have another member of our family, Jess Chin, who is, Stefanie and Jess have decided to get married, so we're very excited to welcome her into our family. And with that, I think we'd invite you to have more food and drink, and certainly we're around to talk with about this. I see some folks who just came in.
Yeah, and we're here. Anybody would like their book signed, you can just come up to the table.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.